Hi everybody, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're having a nice weekend. I'd like to discuss No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai, a chilling book published in 1948, but apparently a very popular book in Japan, and representative of the I novel, a subgenre, a confessional, autobiographical type of book that is popular in Japan, and this is certainly representative of that. But it's a chilling book. It is there are elements that are based in the autobiography of the author Osamu Dazai. And it's his final book, but it's an intense look at a character who is truly struggling with mental health and with any type of confidence, and ultimately the loss of what that character, Obayozo is the character's name, feels in connection to humanity. The very first line of the book kind of like makes that clear. Mine has been a life of much shame. I can't even guess myself what it must be to live the life of a human being. And from there, like the next 170 pages unfold to explain what could bring someone to write these like confessional notebooks. The book is split up into sort of 3 confessional notebooks with that type of statement of just feeling a total loss of connection to humans. And then it goes on, I was born in a village in the Northeast, and it wasn't until I was quite big that I saw my first train. I climbed up and down the station bridge. And so it starts with this just horrifying pair of sentences and then goes into what feels like a deeply autobiographical book. What was one's childhood like? And Dazai takes us through that. And through sort of the experiences the character has, the realizations around when people are deceitful, when people want something but aren't willing to say that, and then as a child, the character Obayozo, again, kind of as our stand-in for Osamu Dazai, will go and like put down what he believes should be like on his wish list for a gift. And then, you know, not that that's what he really wants, but by participating in the deception, he sees that people are happy. And so that's what he's starting to train his life to be, is this life of deception, even though it is not leading to any personal fulfillment for him. And we see how this just continues in dark and horrifying ways. We see the ways he socially interacts at school, the ways in which he then interacts as a young adult in college, and the destructive ways this takes, not just in his relationships with friends, but in his romantic relationships, which aren't even necessarily romantic, and then in the different, you know, aspects of substance abuse. And I should say, this is a book that gets a very qualified recommendation. It goes into very clear detail around alcoholism, drug abuse, even oblique references to sexual assault. And it is all in a very understated tone, but it's clear that Dazai, in his own life and in his own autobiography, experienced so many of these things, particularly alcoholism, and it reads very clearly on the page. As an example, I was taken aback. Haruki at heart did not treat me like a full human being. He could only consider me as the living corpse of a would-be suicide, a person dead to shame, an idiot ghost. His friendship had no other purpose but to utilize me in whichever way would most further his own pleasures. This thought naturally did not make me very happy, but I realized after a moment that it was entirely to be expected that Haruki should take this view of me, that from long ago, even as a child, I seemed to lack the qualifications of a human being, and that, for all I knew, contempt even from Haruki, might be entirely merited. And I mean, that is chilling and horrifying for a person to feel that way about, you know, himself or herself. But that is what we get in this book. So it is an I novel, but it is an I from a viewpoint that, you know, hopefully we don't find ourselves in ever or very often. And so it certainly is a window into a very personal confessional psyche. It is a window into the deep mental health war that Osamu Dazai was waging year after year in the final years of his life as he worked through this. He himself did die by suicide as the final section of this book was published in serial form. And so I think, like, again, a very qualified recommendation on reading this book. I was astonished that it's apparently so popular, because it really does go in a very deep, clear detail around what he was facing, and what he was facing even as a child, as I mentioned. In terms of thinking around that, of course, what immediately sprang to mind were the confessional poets I'd been reading the past couple of weeks, particularly Anne Sexton, and her, like, details around even mental health institutions and stuff. In terms of some more, like, Japanese works, Junichiro Tanizaki's Quicksand sort of takes a very subversive take on the I-novel in a different way from Osamu Dazai. Tanizaki is always more concerned with romantic relationships, and more specifically with, like, lustful, like, sexual relationships, and that's the version of the I-novel we get in Quicksand. Probably my favorite Japanese writer is Yasunari Kawabata, and I think Snow Country is his best work, but Beauty and Sadness feels like the one closest to No Longer Human. And then Haruki Murakami's a more modern writer. Norwegian Wood, I think, has aspects of the I-novel. I think Murakami has kind of gone on record saying he doesn't like I-novels, but this is probably the closest to one that he ever wrote. There are many great Japanese short story writers, among whom is Ryunosuke Akutagawa, and his final story, I think it's over here. Yeah, his final story, which is collected in Rashomon and 17 Other Stories, Spinning Gears, also has some very deep autobiographical elements. It's about a 30-page story that acts almost as like an I story. It's not an I novel. I was inspired to pick up No Longer Human. My window into reading Osamu Dazai was David Peace, one of my favorite living writers, had a list of different books that he felt were influences on his own writing. And as much as I enjoy David Peace, I was very curious about some of these other books. One of them is the USA trilogy by John Dos Passos, which apparently was a deep influence on GB84, which might be my favorite of the Peace novels I've read. But I'm looking forward to starting his Tokyo trilogy, in part because the third book is published this year, and the very first one, Tokyo Year Zero, which is a detective novel, a crime novel, set in the aftermath of World War II. Peace identified reading No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai as a way, sort of his way into that world and understanding the psyche of different characters for Tokyo Year Zero, which I'll probably be reading later this year. And then Dazai was very open about the influence of Fyodor Dostoevsky on his writing, and he actually quotes Crime and Punishment after that second passage I'd read where he talks about not feeling like he has any of the qualities of a human being. And he goes into then talking and having a discussion between characters about what is the antonym of certain things and what is the antonym of crime, and you know, is it penance and different things like that. And so there's this Crime and Punishment reference, but the Dostoevsky novel I kept thinking of was Notes from Underground, particularly from the way that this book begins in a very similar way. I am a sick man, I am a wicked man, an unattractive man. I think my liver hurts. And so there's an I novel aspect in Notes from Underground. This also, I think, is deeply influential on Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. Just in my personal reading, I don't know that there's like explicit mention of that. And then I was also thinking there are ways in which Peace had apparently said that there are some who regard No Longer Human as analogous to Albert Camus' The Stranger. I thought it felt more like something from Kafka than Camus. Perhaps The Trial, it's not a perfect fit. But the other one I saw, and the way in which the I novel can be very confessional, is reminiscent of Marcel Proust. Of course, it's much more concise than Proust. But the aspects of childhood felt comparable to those recorded in Swann's Way. And the one that I kept thinking about as I was reading No Longer Human, the one that really felt like to have a deeper connection, would be The Prisoner, Book 5, where there's a claustrophobic sense. There's this sense of feeling trapped, both in a location as we see in different ways for No Longer Human, whether it's, you know, because of financial straits, a character can't move or leave a relationship, and that kind of there's that claustrophobic sense of location, but also the claustrophobic sense of character, of feeling trapped within our own identity, within our own life, and all that entails. And so The Prisoner really felt like the book from Proust that I was thinking around when I was reading No Longer Human. And then another short work that sort of has this first person's narrative that feels horrifying in ways that reveals new sort of levels in terms of how children relate to adults, how children can feel trapped in that, and the dark paths that can lead down for those people would be We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson, which I read while we were on our trip in Yosemite, and I'll probably discuss like next week. And so I don't know if you've ever read any of Osamu Dazai's works. No Longer Human, there's another one I believe called The Setting Sun. And I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are. Again, as I said, I have a very qualified recommendation for it. I really think it captures what Dazai was experiencing, but that might be too much for some readers, depending on, you know, our own circumstances. So please let me know your thoughts. And again, I really do hope everybody's having a great weekend. Thank you.